Our last panelist is Christi Bell. Christi Bell is the Associate Vice Chancellor and Executive Director of the Business Enterprise Institute at the University of Alaska Anchorage. She's been there for a while and has served in leadership roles there for more than 15 years. And this Business Enterprise Institute makes Christi an economic development practitioner, as it were. It encompasses the university's entire suite of business and economic development programs, which try to bring new revenues to the university and, of course, new jobs to Alaska. She is regularly called upon to consult, provide testimony, and she really works to engage with faculty, staff, and students and build a relationship between them and the public and private sectors in Alaska. She holds a certificate in economic development from the International Economic Development Council, as well as an MBA and a Master of Science in Resource Management, both from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And Christi will be talking to us about how to socialize new infrastructure developments with small communities. Over to you, Christi.
Thank you, Ahmed. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for staying with us to the very end. It's a real privilege to be here. In addition to the work that Ahmed just provided, I'm also involved with a team. It's the Emerging Market Analysis team with the Idaho National Laboratory, and we're an interdisciplinary team of university practitioners that are looking at the entire stream involved with deploying nuclear in a variety of different settings. So most of my experience as it relates particularly to nuclear is from doing that work. Although I have decades of experience as an economic development practitioner working in a wide array of economic sectors and both conducting the feasibility analysis, market analysis, due diligence type work, as well as bringing communities, a broad mix of stakeholders, funders, and developers together to take an idea from an inception to implementation. In most of my experience, while I've worked in urban and rural settings, the vast majority of my experience has been in rural remote settings. Those communities off of a road system, completely detached from traditional supply chains and predominantly indigenous. So that influences some of my context, although I'll have to say I've been invited to work in other settings across the US, and many of those lessons learned that I'm going to speak to, I find quite relevant. Most of what we do, and so some of it is because of the team that I'm a part of, and our mindset is really entrepreneurial. So the Google Sprint process, I think, is one to look up if you're curious about more of this. Happy to answer questions around it. But we really try to understand who our users are, what is that audience, and try to put ourselves in their shoes. What are their needs? What is the context that they might be pursuing an energy change around? And then we start formulating our strategy. While we use some traditional models, we also know that each case that we're invited to, each community, each region, it's going to be slightly different. And so then we'll test, we'll have some conversations, and we'll develop and pivot or ideate as we move along. We'll ultimately choose a best direction to go forward and storyboard it for our clientele, but also knowing that it's probably still going to be ideated and amended as we move forward. And then we'll continue to work and learn with our clients as we move forward. So that entrepreneurial mindset also, clearly influences a lot of what we do. And then as it relates particularly to maturing an energy solution for these communities, repeatedly, regardless of the industry sector we've been working in, regardless of the community, it seems like the cost of energy, workforce development, tend to be key obstacles, key hurdles that these communities face as they're pursuing their economic development strategy. So I encourage you all to either tap an economic development professional and or, you know, the talents of the individuals of the panelists that are here today to help understand some of what's driving these communities that you're working with as you're pursuing these energy solutions, because that will help create more of the pull into these communities. I'd also argue, you know, while local politics also are at times hurdles, economic development comes in these 20-year timeframes. And we argue within our shop that those 20 years reset every day. And so helping these communities to understand that their bigger, audacious goals are achievable, but oftentimes figuring out new and mature energy solutions is a key component, helps them see themselves as part of the solution. And then some more general rules that we operate by. So again, more than a model that we follow, we really try to be invited into the process instead of letting the process kind of push us in. And so we'll spend some time on the front end if we know a project's coming to fruition, to really get ourselves invited into a community, start building that trust with the key group of stakeholders on the front end, and be able to test some of our ideas and concepts within a smaller group of stakeholders, so that once we start having this larger community-wide conversation, some of that pull has already naturally happened. We've also found that timing is just incredibly critical, particularly for our communities in Alaska. We have a lot of seasonality change, but then even the work that I've done nationally, these engagements need to be planned well in advance. And working from an academic setting, even though I've had private consulting gigs previous to this, but I've been in an academic setting, as Ahmed said, for quite some time. Our timing is different than the rest of the world's. And so when academics are involved, we need to be thinking about that timing component, how it overlays with key stakeholders and their timing, and then how it overlays with the community's timing, just to find the best way of moving a project forward. And then, as each of the other panelists have mentioned, communicating in a variety of ways, really focusing on listening. I love the idea of antecedent behavior and consequence, only because it's a precursor to or a nice foundation to reflect on. One of the communities we were working in, and the energy solution was desperately needed. And the head of the tribe and the head of the city refused to agree, even though when you met with them privately, they shared the same vision, they shared the same aspirations for their community members. They actually shared the same vision for the solution, but publicly they would not agree to moving the project forward. And I spent some time meeting with them individually, and then one of them invited me in to help facilitate some dialogue between them. And it was one of the most eye-opening of my career. They, for a moment, forgot I was in the room. And one of them said, you know, back in 1920, your family didn't help my family with X. So the antecedent that was influencing their behavior today, even though neither of these individuals were alive in 1920, it was still influencing their behaviors and creating this really negative consequence for this community desperately in need of an energy solution. And as soon as that clicked for them, they were able to move forward and help the whole process move forward. And so I shared that story only because while communicating clearly, listening clearly, really trying to understand, sometimes there's conversations that are way before our entering into a community and not even involved in what we're trying to move forward. And sometimes it's worth trying to feather out some of that just to be able to move a process forward. And then as it relates to inviting a variety of stakeholders, one of the things we've done, and again, this is probably easier in smaller communities, but inviting, and particularly for Indigenous communities, though it works well, inviting high schoolers and or junior high schoolers into the conversation helps them. And again, that's because as an economic development practitioner, we're thinking 20 years forward. These are going to be the leaders of the community moving forward. But we've also found it's a way to influence the adults in the room to perhaps lean in some different ways. And then as it relates to risk and uncertainty, we really try to make certain that we're communicating any risk, but also that everything in life contains some aspects of risk. And that this whole kind of entrepreneurial mindset and helping communities understand what are the risks, how they can mitigate them, and really come to terms with what they can tolerate, helps them to move forward in a more educated way instead of just fearing the potential of risk. So I'll go ahead and stop there.
All right, thank you very much, Christi. I love that anecdote, and I've got some like that of my own. I'd like to invite our three panelists to